Why don't they use this kind of a bar all the time? It's too short, and I can cut right down to the ground, no problem with this. But it's a long ways away, and that's a lot of tip to control. She's a screamer! Today on In the Woodyard, we're going to talk about the right size bar for you to use. Here we go. So there's a saying that's kind of popular because of a guy on YouTube that says it. He says, stand up and buck. Well, we're going to talk about that today because I don't believe in stand up and buck all the time. There's times you need to get on your knee. There's times you need to sit down. There's times you need to lean. But yeah, if you want to save your back, keeping your back straight is good. We're going to talk about the proper bar length. Not just because you can reach out and cut stuff from 5 feet away, but the proper bar length for your height, your size, and your job. That's what we're going to talk about right now. So we're going to start out with this top handle. This is a little bitty 16-inch. This is Bert's new Husqvarna top handle electric. It's a very nice little saw. I'm going to turn it on here. She's a screamer! Nice little saw. This is the right tool for a lot of people. For people that aren't going to be cutting big wood, this is all they need. This is great for obviously guys that do arborist work up in trees, and that's why Bert bought this, so that he can take it up in the tree with him, and it does a great job. Small chain, small bar, plenty of power. These work great for specialty type jobs, or if you're just going to limb a few branches around the yard. But then there's times you need a longer bar. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so I was wrong. This is Bert's little new Husqvarna electric battery operated saw. It's a 14-inch bar. It is not a 16. The one behind it is the 540, and that is a 16-inch bar. And then there's a 20-inch bar, which I don't have here. And then there's the 24, 24, 36, 42, and 60-incher. And down here, we have a 16-inch bar, and then we have a 20-inch bar. Then there's a 24, 24, 24. Now you'll see a lot of 24s. These three all have 24-inch bars, and these two currently have 24-inch bars, and that one usually has a 24-inch bar. Now you may be asking yourself, or you may be asking me, why so many 24-inch bars? Because I think that's the optimum size for most people, depending on where you are. Now we're going to talk about what kind of wood you're cutting, what kind of job you're doing, and what size is going to be best for you. So like I said, if you're cutting with a top handle, you're cutting little bitty stuff, little bitty saw is all you need. You're probably never going to cut anything more than 8 or 10 inches, and that's what this is made for. The next one, same thing, this little 540, it's got the 16-inch. You're never going to cut anything more than about a foot, and you shouldn't, because once you get to about 8 inches, the saw has got all it can handle, and you're wasting time. That's when you need to go up to a bigger bar, something like a 20-inch bar or a 24-inch bar. Now the 24-inch bars, to me, are the optimal size bar because of my height, and because of the kind of wood that I cut, and because of my cutting style. We're going to talk about that. So these saws that I have here, like I said, we've got a wide range from 14 inches all the way up to 60 inches. Somewhere in there is going to be the size saw you're going to want. Smaller than that, the little bitty pruning saws with the 6 or 8 inch, yeah, no. That's if you're going to just prune a branch or two. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about saws that actually do work, not saws that you play with occasionally and you trim a couple little bitty branches on your apple tree or your bushes. I guess those kind of have a place and a purpose, and I have one of those. I have a couple different ones. For most jobs, if you're going to be cutting wood for either production, for yourself, for burning, or if you're going to be cutting down a tree, multiple trees because you want firewood, and if you're logging, you're going to want multiple saws. I myself, when I go to the woods, I like to take 3 or 4 saws. The reason is, number one, if one quits running for some reason, it happens. If you use your saws a lot, stuff will go wrong. You will have problems. There's guys that say, oh, I never had a problem with my saw. Well, then you haven't cut very much. I don't care what kind of saw you have. If you cut a lot, you're going to have problems eventually. Something's going to break. Something's going to go wrong. You're going to have something loosen up. You're going to have something done to it if you cut a lot. If you only cut once in a while, yeah, maybe your saw never has problems. Maybe you're the guy that every time when you're done cutting, you meticulously go through it, take it all apart, clean off every little spot of grease, put it all away, put it in a vacuum sealed bag and put it on a shelf. Maybe that's the case, but I know that's not the case for most guys. Most guys cut and they throw the saw on a workbench or in the garage, whatever, and it sits. We're talking about saws that actually do work here, saws that produce quantity of wood. Whether it's firewood or production for logging, you're going to want a saw that you're going to be able to depend on. And that's why I take 3 or 4, like I mentioned. So when I'm cutting, if I have a problem with the saw, I set it down. I don't play around in the woods trying to fix the saw, trying to figure out what's wrong with it. If I throw a chain, if it starts running bad, I set it down, grab the next saw. It's more important for me when I'm on location cutting, whether I'm cutting in someone's yard or I'm cutting firewood out in someone's woods, I want to be able to keep cutting because I'm there to do the job. I'm not there to fix equipment. That can be done later. Spares are very important. So like I said, I'll grab the next one and then the next one. Now, for instance, if I'm cutting all day long and I've got 3 saws or 4 saws, I will start with one saw. When it runs out of gas, I set it down, I grab the next saw. When that one runs out of gas or it gets dull, I set it down, I grab the next saw. When that one runs out of gas or gets dull, I grab the next one. It gives all of my saws a break, so I'm not abusing the saws over and over and over. And if you run your saw tank after tank after tank on a hot day, it's no different than you when you're working on a hot day. You need to take a break and cool off occasionally. For those of you that have cut wood in any kind of volume and have been out in the woods when it's 90, 95 degrees and no wind and sun like it is today, you basically want to cool off occasionally. Your saw is the same. That's why I use 3 or 4 saws. Now, the other reason is the saws get dull. I sharpen my saws pretty much every tank. It's rare that I'll go 2 tanks. If I'm cutting perfect wood, maybe in a pile, maybe it's wood that is hung up, it's not touching the ground, I'm not limbing, and I'm cutting wood, I'm blocking it over and over and over, really good conditions, then maybe you don't need to sharpen every tank, but for sure every 2 tanks. Just cutting the wood, if you're cutting hardwood for instance, and probably for those of you that don't cut much hardwood, you might not know this. Oak, especially red oak, has little bitty fine bits of sand in it. It draws it up from the ground. So you're constantly cutting sand. It's just the way it is. That's how red oak is. And we cut a lot of red oak. If you cut wood that has been cut or skidded out in the spring or summer or even fall, it's being dragged through the mud a lot of times. You're going to be cutting some mud and some dirt, which is why I like buying my wood in the wintertime, because that way when it's dropped on the snow and it's dragged out on the snow, it's picked up, the snow is on it, there's no dirt on it. The ground is frozen, so it stays nice and clean. That's important. So when I'm cutting all day long, I want my saws to be as sharp as possible at all times. If I notice a saw is starting to cut slower, even if I only run, say, a half a tank through it, instead of forcing it, I set it down, I grab the next saw. That is really important because your production matters. The other reason why I like to run saw after saw and have them to get a break is that I can keep going and keep working, give the saws a break. When I get all the saws used up, the 3 or 4 saws I have, I run a tank through all of them, I start back over, I sharpen all the saws, I fill them up with gas again, and then I go back to the first saw. So if I'm cutting, 7, 8, 9, 10 tanks in a day, if I'm cutting all day long, that way the saws get a little break, I get a little break halfway through the day to sharpen, refill them. It works good for me and the saws, and you want to keep your saws happy and you want to keep your body happy. So now for the average person that's going to cut in their yard, or if they're just going to cut in a little bit of woods they have, 16 to a 20-inch bar is probably all you're ever going to need. And the reason a 20-inch bar is big enough is because a 20-inch bar will give you a 40-inch cut. So if you got a 40-inch tree, a 20-inch bar will cut that whole tree. You can cut all the way around on it. I know guys on the West Coast like to have their big 32, 36-inch bars, and yes, they do sometimes cut really big trees, monster trees where they need the 5-foot bars. I see it. They cut some big stuff. But I think what happens is a lot of people, the average guy, sees the pros running the big long bars and they think, oh, I gotta have a big long bar too. No, you shouldn't. Number one, you probably can't handle it. Number two, you probably aren't cutting anything that big. You just probably aren't. A 20 to a 28-inch bar is probably the sweet spot for most people. Now, if you're a shorter person, a 20-inch bar is all you're gonna need. If you're like 5 foot tall, 5'2", 5'4", when you're standing with the 20-inch bar, I'll give you a little demonstration here, with a 20-inch bar, and you wanna cut down to the ground, say you're only 5'2", you'd be about this tall. When this arm is straight, your saw is almost touching the ground. For me, it's way far from the ground. But if I pick up this 24-inch bar right here, When this arm is straight and it's cutting down here, my saw is almost touching the ground. With just a little bit of a spread with my legs here, I can cut maybe just a little bit of a bend, maybe a little bit of a reach. My saw is almost touching the ground. So 24 for me is ideal. Now, if you're 5'4", you might only need a 20-inch bar. But if you're 6'4", you probably need a 28-inch bar. And I know a couple people that are that tall, and 28-inch bar is perfect for them, because when they're standing straight, they got their left arm straight, and the saw goes down to the ground, the saw is pretty much just about touching the ground, which is close enough. I don't need to be this guy. Let me grab a 36-incher here. I'm gonna throw some gloves on, because I gotta handle some of these saws by grabbing them, and they're sharp, and I don't want to be cut. We'll move these little guys out of here. So this is a 36-inch bar right here on this Husqvarna 592. When this is standing up, it's right here. Now this feels really comfortable. I like this with a 36-inch bar, but I'm not cutting right now. This is basically what I see a lot of the loggers out on the West Coast using. And that's fine if you're cutting big stuff. But if you're bucking, for instance, when I got this arm straight, because you don't want to be curling this all the time, your arms are going to get sore. If you're holding this all the time off the ground, if you want this arm to be straight so you're not holding it so far, I'm about 3 feet away from myself right here to where the ground is. And it's really easy to hit the ground with this long thing. So if you really, really like sharpening chains a lot and you're really good at it, use the longest bar you can get, because you're going to be sharpening chains a lot. Hitting the ground happens a lot, because when you cut a tree down, it drops to the ground. If you're cutting in a log pile, you're going to have stuff on the ground. You're going to hit the ground a lot. Unless you're an expert, and not many of you are, I'm not even an expert, I don't want my bar to be hitting the ground. I want to be close. Close. That's it. So the 36-inch bar, and we're going to show you a little demonstration later what I mean by that, is a little long for most people. This is what's ideal for me. This is a 24-inch bar, and when I go down to the ground, this arm is straight and the bar is just about hitting the ground. And if you're a steel guy, the 25-inch bar that they talk about is the exact same bar. Exact same. Husqvarna calls it a 24, Steel calls it a 25. Echo calls it a 24 as far as I know. And the Husqvarna and Echo bars are interchangeable. They have the same connection. So, and there are adapters you can get, but 24-inch bar is going to be all most people can handle. And if you're a beginner, you should not start with a 24-inch bar. You should start with a little bitty 16 or 18-inch bar, so you learn the saw first. Don't go jump into a big bar right away. That's how you're going to get hurt, and it happens. So this for me is the ideal size, and this 24-inch bar gives me a 48-inch cut. That's 4 feet. How many 4-foot trees do you really cut down? Not very many. And when you occasionally have one, you'll be able to do it. If you got one that's bigger than that, then maybe you want to get a bigger bar. But that's not the normal. That's unusual. Very unusual. This is not an example of my manhood, and it isn't of yours either. You do not need something this big 99.999% of the time. For me, this is more of a toy than anything. We bought this for cutting down one specific tree. About a year ago, my brother and I cut down an ash tree that was, I think it was 16 feet around. And the bar wouldn't cut quite all the way through it, so we needed the longest bar possible. From that particular tree, we got over 7 full cords from one tree. It was that big. If you want to see it, it was about a year ago, and that's why we got this. Now, this is rare to have one this big. This bar alone is like 350 bucks. The chain's like 150 bucks. The saw retails for like around $1,900, $2,000, something like that. So this is not what most people should have or get. I probably shouldn't even have it because it's just stupid big. There are cases where guys need it. If you're a tree service guy and you do a lot of arborist work, and you may cut down willow trees or cottonwood trees around here, they do get monstrous. They do get really, really big. So occasionally, those people in our area use a saw like this, but this is not normal. This is Abby. This is an Abby saw. It's Abby normal. So this saw with the bar weighs 42 pounds. 42 pounds. So think of something that you know that weighs about 40 pounds. Pick it up and hold it with your arms outstretched. This is not easy to handle. And neither are the 3-foot bars, neither are the 4-foot bars, neither are the 28-inch bars. Every time you go longer, the tip of the bar gets heavier and harder to control. There's a lot going on here. For instance, when I pick this up, I'm going to set it down first because I got to do it slowly without hitting the chain because I just sharpened it. Right now I'm probably about, I got to be almost 7 feet away from you. So watch this. When I pick this up, I got to back up a little more. I'm just about touching the camera. So it's stupid big, stupid big. I'm going to set it down here because it's stupid big. And I'm going to grab the 48-inch bar and show you that. Now, a lot of people, like I said, on the West Coast will run this size of a bar. A 42-inch bar, if you go side to side, cutting all the way through, 42 inches gives you an 84-inch cut, which is 7 feet. 7 feet you're going to get with this. So I'm standing, I'm going to go to the same place here, bring this one up. See how close this is to you guys? This is a long bar, and if I was to cut with this on the ground, I'm 4 feet away, maybe 5 feet away from the tip. I can't see the tip. So if you're cutting logs on the ground, you can't see the tip. The other thing that a lot of people don't think of, you don't have nearly as much power on the tip as you do back here. So here's the 36-inch bar. And with this one, that's how long it is. When I'm standing here, if I got this arm straight and I'm cutting, right now I'm about 3 feet from the ground. And if I was cutting in a log and I couldn't see the back side of the curve of the log, I can't see the ground. You got to guess. And then you're like this, kind of trying not to hit the ground. You don't want to hit the ground. That's just, unless you're an expert, like I said, this is too big. Too big. So for me, this is the 24-inch bar. And like I said, when I'm going to cut down to the ground, I'll show you guys, I think you'll be able to see this. When I cut down to the ground, this arm is straight. I'm within about 1 inch of the ground. And that's just about right for me when I'm cutting. Because that way I can get my feet apart and I can cut down without hitting the ground 99.9% of the time. Yes, I do hit the ground occasionally because, like I said, it happens. So this for me is just about right. I don't want one much bigger than this. Now, if you're an actual logger like my brother Ken was for many years, he ran a 20-inch bar for probably 30 years. And he cut a lot of big trees. And the reason is, when you're in the woods, going through brush, crawling around, trimming stuff, and you're trimming out big bushy white pines or big bushy spruce trees, you don't want a long bar. You want to be able to cut right close by, because always you got to reach way out trying to cut. It's harder, it's more work. Now, this saw has a light bar, and I hold right here. It's got pretty good balance. See how the balance is? It doesn't have a lot of tip weight. It's pretty darn nice. Now watch this 36-inch bar when I pick this one up. It's got a lot of tip weight, and it's probably 50% heavier because of the bar. So you got to constantly be fighting that up here. You're constantly fighting it, lifting up to go over branches. So for most people, this is not the right size saw. So I'm going to show you an example of what's too long and what's too short. Obviously, if I want to stand up and cut with this, it's too short. Look at that. Can't reach the wood if it's on the ground. Yeah, if it's up here, I can reach it. Or if I can go up here, I can reach it. But a lot of times you're going to be cutting stuff on the ground. So I'm going to be bent over cutting, which if you're only cutting a little bit, you're probably going to be okay. But you're cutting all day long, you don't want to be this guy. This is not good. So, too short. I'm going to go to the next short one. Yeah, that was a 14-inch bar. This one here is a 16. See here, I can just touch the wood with this arm straight, so I'm still going to be bent over. This is a little 540, still too short. But again, for yard work, for the average guy, this is probably all he's going to need. This next one here, I thought was an 18. It's actually I thought it was a 20. It's actually an 18-inch bar. So here I can start to touch it with my arm straight, but I do have to bend over. So this isn't terrible. 20-inch, I would have to do a little bit of a knee bend, a little bit of a lean forward. So 20-inch is kind of the starting point for me personally. I know I can tell you this. I used to run 20-inch bars because I thought that was the size to have. When I switched to 24, I could cut longer. My back did not get as tired. And I'll show you the 24-inch bar next. That's this one right here. So here's the 24-inch bar. Notice when I'm standing here, I can set my hands just like this. And when I'm cutting, I can stand here, this arm fairly straight, this leg fairly straight with very little bend, maybe just a little bend to the knee, and I can cut right down to the ground, no problem with this. And it's just the right size. I can reach out to here and cut. I can cut like this, and I can bring it towards me. This is the size I like best. And like I said, I'm a very average guy in every way, as my wife says. This is a 24-inch bar. I'm 5'10", 5'11", somewhere right in there. And this is the size that I prefer. Now, I've run 28-inch bars. I have found that they're more work because the tip, you got to watch it a lot closer. And in the brush, it's terrible because you got to weave in and out. I did not like it. Every day cutting, if I'm cutting in the woods, I'm cutting brush, or if I'm cutting limbs off of a tree, or if I'm cutting logs for firewood. So this is the size for me is ideal. Now we're going to jump up to a big one. Okay, so if guys say you should stand up and buck, why don't they use this kind of a bar all the time? Because you can stand back here, your back's perfectly straight, and let the saw just fall through. Because every time you pick it up, you got to fight it moving it over. So a shorter bar is going to make it be less work. So for those guys that want the long bars, they should just use these all the time because it's pretty much one of the bigger bars. You can look at it, I can cut way out there. Yeah, no, that wouldn't be fun. It's so hard to control. 42 pounds is a lot of saw. This is what I prefer right here. 24 inches. I can cut right here. I can cut right here. I can cut right here. I can get in here and I can let the saw do the work at the closest part of the bar to the power head. To me, that's the right size. But I might be wrong. Tell me if I am in the comments. So with this 36-inch bar, yes, I can cut way out here, but I really don't have a lot of control of that tip because it's so far away. And if I'm cutting down here, I got to back up so that I can get my arm out straight so I'm not holding this up like this, like I'm doing a curl constantly. You want your arm to be out straight so you're not working as hard. So when I cut through this, I'm not going to be able to see the back side very well because that tip is so far away from me. The ground in the back behind this is basically hidden behind the log. So that's an issue. And one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is that they think that just because everybody in their area is using long bars, they think they have to, like that's the thing. And those people might be professionals and they have a reason for using a longer bar. Number one, they're probably cutting very big trees. Number two, they're cutting in an area that has mainly fir trees, which is like cutting soft butter. Here in the Midwest, Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, we have a lot of hard maple and oak, white and red. And when you cut when it's 20, 30 below, and you lay into a big chunk of hard maple when it's that cold, it's happened to me and it's happened to my brother, your chain will snap. You have to go in kind of easy with it. Those trees are so hard, it's not like cutting softwood. Another example is in Europe. In Europe, most of the trees there are going to be spruce, and they're going to be cut because the forest there is highly managed. 16, 20, maybe 24 inches. That's as big as they're going to cut. So they're regularly, usually cutting with 18 and 20-inch bars. A 20-inch bar for them is big, and a 20-inch bar will cut a 40-inch tree down, no problem. So the whole thing about you got to have a long bar, maybe not. I don't think so. I think you get the right saw for the job and the right saw for you. The right bar length, that is. Now, another reason to think about the bar length is that if you're using a long bar, a 36-inch bar, something like that, and you're cutting wood that is on the ground occasionally, because that's where a lot of it ends up when you cut a tree down, you hit the ground, you're going to be sharpening your chain a lot more. And because it's a 36-inch bar, you're going to have a lot more teeth to sharpen. So unless you're really good at it and you really like sharpening your chain, get the size saw that you're not going to be hitting the ground all the time. To me, that's important. To a lot of people that cut firewood, that's important. Hopefully to a lot of you, it's important to think about. So if you're trying to decide to get, the right size bar for you, go to a pro shop. Don't go to a box store. Go to a pro shop. Talk to them. Find out from them their opinion, because in your area, they're going to know what's appropriate for what you're going to do. Not necessarily what someone else that's a professional is doing. That's fine if they use long bars, if they use short bars like they do in Europe. Use what's best for you, whatever that's going to be. So another thing that you got to consider when it comes to your bar length is if you're cutting in a log pile or trees on the ground, you're going to have to be standing a ways away from your log when you're cutting it. And if your bar is super long, you can't cut with the most powerful part of the bar and chain is right here, not out there. You want to be cutting back here, but look where the tip is. Not good. You take a shorter bar, like a 24-inch right here, and I can take this and I can cut right here. And I can get through half of it, I can come down a little bit, I can roll it, and then I can stand up and cut the rest of it. So yes, if you're cutting with the tip all the time, you can keep your back straight if you got a long one, but you got to watch the ground that much closer. But your saw is not going to be as powerful, it just isn't. And what I do a lot of times is I cut like this. If I'm cutting something down on the ground here, I know it's going to be hard for you guys to see from way over there, but you get the general idea. If I'm cutting something real low on the ground here, I kneel down on one knee, and the reason is I don't want to be cutting out at the tip of the bar when I'm standing up. I want to be cutting right here. I want the most power I can get, and that's right close to the power head. I want to come in like this, cut in on it, and then back out on it. Or if I can drop the saw all the way through, right down to the ground almost, where I'm cutting almost all the way through, do that several times, then roll the log over and then cut. That works better for me. Also, a lot of times I use a wood chuck. It's a cant hook that's got a stand on it, so I can get that piece of wood, roll it up onto the cant hook, and I can get it off the ground. So then when I'm cutting, I can take, it's about this high, so when I'm cutting, I can be just like this. I can be cutting right here. I can get in there and I can cut, and I can stand up and finish the cut. So I'm cutting with the power head right here. I can use the dogs up against it so I can pry and I can get as much bite as I can with the saw. So that's what works for me. So there you go. In my opinion, this is the right size saw for me. What's right for you? Let me know. Do you like a shorter bar, 14-inch? Do you like a 20-inch? Do you like a 24? Do you like a 28? In the comments, let me know what you like best and how tall you are and why you like that size bar. If you're cutting all softwood and you're cutting huge trees, then maybe you want a 32 or a 36 or a 48-inch bar. But that is not the norm. The norm is wood between 6 inches and maybe 28, 30 inches is getting to be big for most people. It might be weird, I might not be right, but that's just my opinion. There you go, folks. That's it for today. You know what to do. Poke the buttons. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 5:30 a.m. with another video for you. Between now and then, go to my channel. There's 1,400 other videos all about firewood and chainsaws and axes and all that fun stuff. Check it out. Good night, Irene.